Assembly who have joined us from across Quebec this afternoon. It's this kind of team spirit, exactly this type of team spirit, that we need to build stronger communities and a stronger Quebec. This city, Longueuil, has developed considerably over time. Before, it was a small suburban community, but it has now become one of the major urban centers in Quebec. As the city developed, the public transit system also developed, moving from a small system of only 100 buses to a major mobility pole that every single day connects thousands of people in Montreal to Montreal and the economic center of the region. That is what efficient infrastructure can accomplish when it's developed with the communities that it serves. When the Premier and myself met for the very first time in mid-April, we talked about a number of priorities, but we constantly came back to a common mission, the need to build. Build big, build bold, build now, and build for Quebec. In order to achieve that, as the mayor has just said, we must work in partnership, because when our governments are moving in the same direction, we can advance more quickly, carry out more projects, and secure better results for all Quebecers. And today, we are carrying out that mission together. We are building major projects together, new ports, new mines, and new energy infrastructure, which will make it possible to better connect Canadians and to connect Canada to new markets. In April, we launched the work to expand the Contrecoeur terminal at the Port of Montreal. 6 months, only 6 months after submitting the project to the Major Projects Office. A few weeks later, we launched work at the Nouveau Monde graphite mine in Saint-Michel-des-Saints, a project which will make it the largest graphite mine in the G7. These projects will create 5,000 jobs and attract $3 billion of investments into our economy. Thanks to Build Canada Homes, we are building affordable housing for Quebecers at speed and at scale. Since we signed an agreement with the Government of Quebec in January, we have already approved the construction of 1,000 housing units right across the province in Montreal, Thetford Mines, Laval, and Joliette.
Our day-to-day lives depend on the infrastructure in our communities. We count on hospitals being close to home when our child is sick. We count on the subways, the trains, the buses to get us to work on time and be sustainable. We count on the community centers and the parks, arenas to provide our kids safe places to play. These are the things that make the difference between a good day and a bad one. They can be deal breakers about whether you live in a neighborhood. They're the building blocks of strong communities, the strong communities that we are building here and across Canada. Dans beaucoup de communautés, les infrastructures locales ne
In many
fonctionnent
communities,
pas
local
comme
infrastructure is not working the way it should. The quality of our roads is deteriorating. Our hospitals are overcrowded and outdated. Our buses, our subways, and our trains need repairs. Local communities are at the heart of Canada. To build Canada strong, Longueuil must be strong, Trois-Rivières must be strong, and Chicoutimi must be strong. That is why today, the Premier and I are announcing a new partnership between the Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec, a partnership that will transform communities right across the province. The new Government of Canada will invest almost $10 billion over the next 10 years, which makes this one of the most significant investments to be made in the history of Quebec. Investments that will make it possible to build new hospitals or new clinics, to introduce new public transit lines, as well as new buses, to offer your community infrastructure that is quicker, more affordable, and more reliable. Earlier this year, our government launched the Build Community Strong Fund in order to transform community infrastructure in Canada. And we are now working in partnership with the provinces and municipalities to build local infrastructure, better hospitals, improved public transit, and new community centers. And we have already announced 13 new projects right across the country, including new or improved roads just north of here in Laval, such as on Le Bal, Orly, and Saint-Hubert streets. And today, we are building on that success by starting projects right across Quebec. As part of the infrastructure stream, we will be investing almost $3 billion in projects prioritized by Quebec, which will make it possible to construct more lodging, more housing, university campuses, and community centers. And we will participate in funding new educational and research facilities at the University of Montreal on the Mille campus. We are also supporting the construction of a regional aquatic complex at Candiac-La Prairie. And because communities' dynamism rests on solid health care, the Build Community Strong Fund will also be supporting significant work to modernize and expand 17 hospitals and clinics in Quebec. These are investments that will improve access to care so that the people of Quebec can receive the health care they need when they need it. Investments such as expanding the operating theater and the ambulatory surgery unit at Hôpital Charlemagne, right here in Longueuil, expanding the operating theater at the Hôpital de Chicoutimi in Saguenay, modernizing emergency services at l'Hôpital Maisonneuve-Rosemont, and refurbishing the university-affiliated Hospital Center in Gatineau, as well as renovations to the oncology unit at the Quebec Cardiology and Pulmonology Institute in Quebec City. The agreements we are announcing today will also make it possible to transform public transit right across Quebec. We are investing almost $6 billion through the Canada Public Transit Fund to build new projects, create new bus lines, and maintain existing systems. This fund will better support the provinces and territories, as well as municipalities, in carrying out major public transit projects. And thanks to this new fund, more than $4 billion will be allocated to the Government of Quebec for comprehensive projects such as the Quebec City Tramway. There are other projects as well that could benefit from these investments. Perhaps the extension of the Blue Line and the tramway project, as I said. And thanks to the Zero Emission Transit Fund, we are collaborating on 11 different projects that will make it possible to electrify transit across Quebec. This program will be funded through an investment of $400 million, and we will also be installing charging stations at the Saint-Laurent, Anjou, and Legendre transit stations, making an easier transition and a more affordable one to electric buses. It will also make it possible to electrify garages and operational centers, particularly in Lévis, Quebec City, Sherbrooke, Saguenay, and right here in Longueuil.
Now, it's not just what we build, it's also how we build. We build across this country inclusively, in full partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We build in solidarity with workers, creating good union jobs. We build sustainably, because reducing emissions is not just a moral duty, it's an economic imperative. And above all, with our new Buy Canadian policy, we will build Canadian by becoming our own best customer. So we're building from major projects to new community centers. And while we do so, some of this will take time. We're laying the foundations for a stronger, more resilient, more sustainable economy, a transformation that won't happen overnight. So our government is also giving Canadians a boost today and a bridge to tomorrow, with a relentless focus on bringing down their costs. That's why we temporarily suspended the federal fuel excise tax to save up to 10 cents until Labor Day. It's why we cut taxes for 22 million middle-class Canadians. It's why we introduced the new Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit. Nearly 3 million people in Quebec will be getting their first checks this Friday, up to $533 for a family of 4. Alors, nous travaillons ensemble avec un esprit de fédéralisme coopératif.
We are working together in a spirit of cooperative federalism to make this country stronger, fairer, and more prosperous. And Quebec is at the very heart of that mission. Quebec and Canada are building every single day, thanks to the strength of their people, thanks to the skilled workers who pour the concrete and weld the steel, thanks to the bus drivers and train drivers who get you to work and your children to school, to the physicians and nurses and researchers who save lives every day. By investing in our communities, we are investing in ourselves. And that is how we build Quebec strong and Canada strong for all. Thank you very much. And now it is a great honor to turn it over to the Premier of Quebec, Madame Fréchette.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to see all of you in such great numbers for a very important announcement this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to convey my greetings to Prime Minister Carney. And I salute him for his pragmatic determination. He's in as much of a hurry as myself to get results for Quebecers. I also want to thank Minister Charette, Minister Boulay for being here, Minister Robertson, Minister Lightbound, and of course the members of Parliament and the Member of Parliament for Longueuil, Sherry Romano, and all the people who are present today from both the Quebec and federal governments. And Catherine Fournier, thank you very much for receiving us here in Longueuil. And of course, my greetings to the Mayor of Quebec, Bruno Marchand, and the Mayor of Montreal, Soraya, Mr. Boyer, Mayor of Laval, Ms. Maude Bissonnette of Gatineau, and the President of the Federation of Quebec Municipalities, and the first Vice President, and ladies and gentlemen, the representatives of collegial and university institutions, as well as government departments and municipal facilities. Thank you very much. So I'm very, very pleased to be here in Longueuil for this wonderful announcement with the Government of Canada. You know that, as Mr. Carney just said, 48 hours after I was sworn in as Premier, I went to Ottawa to meet with the Prime Minister of Canada. And I talked about our needs, the needs of Quebecers in a number of different areas. And of course, one of the issues was infrastructure. Now, in Quebec, as I have said before, and I even said that yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce, we must maintain our infrastructure. So we're going to put even more of a focus on that and on maintaining and modernizing our current infrastructure. In Quebec, it's not about being, you know, it's not based on trends, but it's based on the fact that much of our infrastructure was built in the 60s and 70s. And of course, now it's coming to the end of its useful life, all at the same time. So that, of course, is a huge amount of work, a huge challenge that we must meet. And of course, to carry out that kind of catch-up mission with our infrastructure, of course, we need investments. And yesterday, I announced that we were going to have the Minister of Finance and Infrastructure from Quebec that would prepare an infrastructure maintenance project, because we need a plan. We need a structured plan that will allow us to move forward with that plan to better maintain our infrastructure. It will also allow us to innovate and work with the private sector, because I am determined to bring in the private sector to help us to move forward with that work. We'll also be able to find new means of funding to move forward faster, but for less money. And when it comes to the existing infrastructure built by our parents and grandparents, we must get our fair share of federal investments. And today, I'm very happy to announce that Quebec will be receiving its fair share. In fact, even more than its fair share in terms of federal investments, while at the same time respecting our jurisdiction, which was inevitable. We have concluded a plan to develop and work on our main priorities. Those are Quebec's priorities. It's the Quebec government that chose those projects. And of course, we're talking about for $10 billion worth of investments. The agreements deal with our infrastructure in 4 areas: health, transportation, transit, housing, and higher education. Now, we have received $1 billion to fund the modernization of our hospitals as well. And that money will allow us to fund such projects as the Hôtel Dieu project hospital in Lévis, and the Rosemont Hospital, the hospital in Chicoutimi and Jonquière, and many, many others. It will also enable us to carry out the construction of a hospital center in the Outaouais region and the expansion of the operating theater here at Charlemagne in Longueuil. So you can see that it covers a wide number of projects right across Quebec. On transportation, we agreed on $4.4 billion to fund our public transit projects. And that represents 26.6% of the entire federal envelope. So it is well above our demographic weight. And it also represents $600 million more. And that will be used for the Quebec tramway project. And today the federal government is saying present. We will be able to move forward with that project now. This agreement will also allow us to move forward on our vision for public transit across every region of Quebec, including in strategic poles like Montreal and Gatineau. And these projects will soon be confirmed. We will also receive $1.3 million to support our transit corporations in Sherbrooke, Quebec City, Montreal, and a few other cities in the province. There's $400 million as well to support 11 electrification projects for transit in many different regions of the province. So the scope is quite wide. When it comes to housing and education, we're talking about $2.7 billion to build student housing, renovate cégeps, and renovate universities. So that's almost $10 billion that will help us to fund very good projects for Quebecers and that will contribute to develop our economy. Now, that announcement is part of my government's approach, which is to work in partnership with the Government of Canada and other governments. And this is about developing our regions to create good jobs and a partnership to deliver solid results for Quebecers. So we're in a new international context now, and we mustn't be divided, as some people seem to want to do. More than ever, I am convinced that we must unite. We must come together and pool our forces, collaborate without making compromises about our specific responsibilities, and that's exactly what we're doing today. Together, we are building the future of Quebec. And now I turn it over to Minister Robertson.
And you have been listening to the Prime Minister and the Premier of Quebec, Christine Fréchette, making a big announcement. The Prime Minister saying $10 billion over 10 years, one of the most significant investments in the history of Quebec. And the CBC's Karina Roman is joining me from Ottawa. And by the way, we are going to go back to that news conference taking place in Longueuil, Quebec, once we hear reporters ask some questions. Karina, what's stood out to you?
Well, yeah, this is a large sum of money. I mean, it is over 10 years, but $10 billion. If you go to the backgrounder, there is lots of detail about which funds it's coming from and what those funds are meant to do. I'm not sure that people need that level of detail right now, but the government is saying it's one of the largest infrastructure investments in Quebec's history. You'll notice it also is meant, and that's how the Prime Minister framed it, to cover all its focuses or foci. I don't know what that word is, but just that it's as he said, not just what we build, but how. So in consultation with Indigenous people, this is about union jobs, good paying union jobs. They want to build sustainably, so this is about electrification. It's obviously about building Canada, and he said, with the Canada Buy Canada strategy. This is really about making sure that also Canada is its best customer domestically. So this does seem to check all the boxes, at least from their point of view and how they're framing it. The other thing that stood out was listening to the Premier of Quebec saying this is not just Quebec getting its fair share, but getting more than its fair share with alongside respect for its jurisdiction. So clearly also very happy at the podium would be the Premier of Quebec.
Karina, thank you. The CBC's Karina Roman live in Ottawa.
behalf of Canadians, just if I may, Philippe, just the appreciation we've had for your contributions to Canadian hockey and Canadian pride over the years.
Prime Minister Mark Carney welcomed the Montreal Victoire to Parliament Hill today. The Victoire became the first Canadian team in the 3-year history of the PWHL to win the Walter Cup. Montreal defeated the Ottawa Charge 3-1 last month in the best-of-5 championship series. Time now for a look at your national forecast. Here's Matt Hamill from the Weather Network.
Well, for British Columbia, we have an active pattern building back in. We can take a look as we go Thursday and beyond. A lot of rainfall expected to be really lingering over a couple of days. And with that, we'll see temperatures also dropping. So for Vancouver, just 15 degrees, the forecast high for both Friday and Saturday. And then really not much above 20 degrees for daytime highs beyond that. So a pattern change there, and luckily a pattern change for Alberta as well. Some communities, as of Monday night, already recorded 100 millimeters of rain as we look through our Tuesday and maybe some parts of our early Wednesday hours. Last bit of rainfall before that winds down. Temperatures will start to rebound for Alberta as well. But Tuesday, a severe weather threat, especially for southern Manitoba. The area highlighted in red here, where we have that likelihood of severe weather, strong wind gusts, large hail, and can't rule out rotating storms that could produce tornadoes with this pretty impressive looking cluster of storms for our Tuesday. Looks like maybe even Wednesday bringing another shot of potentially stormy weather. Meanwhile, the month of June did not get off to a great start in parts of Atlantic Canada. Looking at Newfoundland, where Monday brought a little bit of snowfall. Now, for our Tuesday, the rain is what's mostly moved over to the Maritimes. And for Cape Breton specifically, things will gradually clear out, though. Wednesday and beyond, much nicer weather is expected, especially for the Maritimes. Meanwhile, for Ontario and Quebec, it's been quite the stretch of dry weather. Toronto, 8 days and counting with the sunshine and dry conditions. That may come to an end, though, by the weekend.
We're taking you back to Longueuil, Quebec, where the Prime Minister and the Premier of Quebec are speaking to reporters. Let's listen.
Infrastructure and various projects that we discussed earlier. It's very important for me because the situation is urgent. We're in a context that it really isn't an easy one with the tariff war and the conflicts around the world. So there's a lot of pressure on people's budgets. And so it was important for me to generate projects connected to investments from the federal government. And that's why we accelerated the discussions. And at the same time, we wanted to ensure that Quebec's jurisdiction would be respected. And there I can say mission accomplished. Did you have to make concessions? No, not really. And I want to convey my greetings to Jean Boulet and all the colleagues who worked on this, Benoit, of course, and others who were deeply involved in those negotiations. No, the requirements basically reflect the requirements in previous agreements, and they totally respect the projects that are in Quebec's infrastructure plan, as well as the timelines we set, and consequently, yes, it fully respects Quebec's jurisdiction.
Paul Wells, journaliste indépendant. Bonjour, Madame la Première Ministre.
Hello, Premier. Unfortunately, my question is for the Prime Minister.
You were asked, this file has not advanced for a couple of years. You were asked what unblocked, and you said, we unblocked. What needed unblocking? What does unblocking entail? And since the Premier said twice that Quebec is getting more than its population share of funding, who's getting less?
First off, let me just compliment the Premier, Premier Fréchette, Madame la Première Ministre. It was less than 2 months ago that we met before, as the Premier said, before the Premier was formally sworn in to the role. And we had a very clear meeting of minds and priorities, and there were these areas, as you say in your question, Mr. Wells, of funds that were available and an opportunity to move them forward, given the priorities of the government of Quebec, given the priorities of the economy here, economy across. So, we've been ready, and we put our best people on it. as did the government here, and worked very hard and unblocked these 5 accords to the $10 billion. Now, look, the government, there's various ways to assign, from the federal government's perspective, distribute funds. Part of it is determined by opportunity, as you would appreciate. So if there are more, we're surrounded by sustainable transportation, literally here, and ability to build that out. So a fund for sustainable transportation is more likely to be balanced in that direction. It's also a question in terms of, as everyone has mentioned in their comments, the health of the existing infrastructure and the ability to renew that infrastructure, particularly in health infrastructure, and you see the big skew here. So a true partnership coming together, priorities set by the government of Quebec, as has been noted, but building up, if I can say, and of course it's for the government to decide, but building up from the municipal and local level, which is the right way to do this. So I said we unblocked it, and it's because, and what I meant by that, and I'll finish here, is that we sat down, we made the priorities, we're going to get on with it. It's what is good for Longueuil, for Quebec, for Canada, and now it's there. And the intention of everybody here is to make sure that these agreements move to action and investment. Thank you.
Prochaine question. Next question.
En français, plus simplement, c'est quoi le déblocage, si je peux dire comme ça?
What did I mean by unblocking?
Et si je peux dire, moi-même, nous avons
And
des priorités.
the Premier and myself have priorities. We believe it's time to build Quebec strong. And there are priorities that have been set by the Quebec government and federal priorities. And we laid that responsibility in the laps of very responsible ministers with strict deadlines, and that is the result. That's the result. A major agreement, a lot of money, Quebec priorities, and now is the time to act, to get that money working.
Maura Forrest, Globe and Mail. This is a question for Mr. Carney et aussi pour Madame Fréchette ensuite. Mr. Carney, the leader of the Parti Québécois this morning said that this announcement was intended to show that the federal government is being especially generous with Quebec to try to undermine the likelihood that Quebecers will elect a sovereigntist government this fall. Is this announcement about weakening the independence movement? Et Madame Fréchette, si vous pouvez répondre au même commentaire de M.
Could answer the same question, please.
Si cette annonce qui vient à quelques
Is this announcement just a few months before the election intended to achieve that purpose?
This announcement is about strengthening Quebec, making communities across Quebec more prosperous, more sustainable, better health care, more connected, better places to live. This is policy. This is the government's coming together to serve the people we serve. It's not a political calculation at all. The only thing I will reiterate is that I'm very pleased, as is Minister Robertson, Minister Lightbound, Minister Champagne, and our colleagues, to be able to work directly with the government, move forward rapidly, the government of Quebec move forward rapidly for real results for Quebecers. And je vais laisser la parole à Madame la Première.
Alors moi, depuis que j'ai pris mes fonctions il y a quelques semaines,
since I assumed my duties a few weeks ago, I really wanted to demonstrate to Quebecers that we're governing, that we're moving forward, and that we are aligned on Quebec's priorities. Now, as you know, I went to Ottawa to meet with Mr. Carney to develop an action plan on infrastructure, because we absolutely must move forward with these projects. There were negotiations that had been underway for many months, and I wanted to move forward more quickly based on what had already been accomplished previously, and we moved up the pace, and that's why you're seeing this result today.
Harry North with the Montreal Gazette. Question for Prime Minister Carney. The U.S. President is once again making his 51st state jab, and the U.S. Ambassador to Canada reshared it. Is this an ambassador that Canada can work with, or is it time to ask him to leave?
Look, the short answer is no to the second part of your question. And it's an administration that we have to work with. It's our biggest trading relationship. It's our biggest security relationship, many other relationships. And we work with that administration. We take the administration as it is and are working together on a number of areas. And I'll just underscore, and I know there are other questions, I'll just underscore that Minister LeBlanc and Madame Charette, une autre Madame Charette, our negotiator-in-chief, not negotiatrice en chef, they are in Washington today working with the U.S. administration discussing our trading relationship.
Just to follow up on that, does the 51st state jab at this point impact those trade negotiations happening in Washington?
I mean, the president is an exceptionally active user of social media. You probably can chart his usage of it. It's only gone up in recent months, and we're not going to respond or react to everything that he posts. Thank you.
Prochaine question, next question.
Oui, bonjour, Anthony Ouellet de la presse. Madame Fréchette, hier à la Chambre de commerce
Fréchette, yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce, you talked about a project in the eastern part of the city, asking that this move forward more quickly. Now, it talked about the Blue Line, it talked about the Quebec tramway. Do you have something concrete to offer Montreal in terms of a project in eastern Montreal? Well, it will be comprehensive, and it's very important for eastern Montreal, and I would like to see us move forward at a faster pace. So we will continue those discussions with the mayor of Montreal. And the criterion that is important for me is to have a proposal that allows us to ensure there are efficiency gains through the project in terms of how long the commute takes between the eastern part of the city and the downtown. So we're looking for a development that will mean quicker transportation and will meet Quebecers' needs. And you are positioning yourself as a choice partner for the federal government. What about the Defense Bank? Well, I can say that Montreal already has all the necessary assets in terms of resilience. We have a recognized financial center, which means there's high-level expertise. We have the aerospace sector as well that is present here in Montreal in particular. Shipbuilding, cyber security, critical and minerals. These are all sectors that can make a contribution when it comes to defense investments. And, of course, our expertise on finance and in supporting international organizations. Montreal is the host of a number of international organizations with the United Nations. So we already have the kind of expertise we need to support such organizations. And I know that Prime Minister Carney will make a decision soon on this. And I believe he has all the necessary information at this point to recognize the excellence of Montreal's candidacy. Presse Canadienne, Ms. Fréchette, I would like a clarification. Now, we're talking about a considerable amount of money, $10 billion from the federal government. You think it's too much? No, it's more than my budget. Having said that, is there a commitment of equivalency? In other words, the Quebec tramway project requires a lot of money. Now, has every single project been negotiated separately? I just want to try and understand exactly what the partnership is across Quebec. We know about the partnership with the federal government, but between Quebec and the municipalities or other institutions, how will it work? Well, the Quebec government has set certain priorities, and they are part of the Quebec infrastructure plan. So these are projects where we have already set aside money to provide the necessary funding. Now, today, the federal government is injecting money that will expand the funding necessary for these projects that are already part of our plans. So that will make it possible to go even further. Now, as I said, we had already set these priority projects, and the federal government is adding its share to expand those budgets. Mr. Carney, when will that money be available? It is available.
À partir de maintenant.
It's available now.
Mais cela dit, c'est sur
Having said that,
le plan est sur
the plan
dans quelques instants, c'est sur une décennie.
covers, or some of the agreements cover a decade.
Et ça dépend sur le projet
So it does
actuel.
depend on
Mais
the
il n'y a pas de
specific projects,
des délais.
but there's no question of delaying access to the funds. No,
Aucune question sur
no,
ça.
no question of that happening.
Prochaine question.
Oui, bonjour, Aimé Lemieux de la télé de Radio-Canada. Ma question est pour vous, M. Carney.
My question is for you, Mr. Carney.
Comment c'est possible,
Perhaps
selon
you
vous,
could
d'avoir des discussions
explain
constructives avec
how
les
you can
Américains
have
sur la CIUM quand M. Trump
constructive
encore va parler du
discussions
Canada
on
comme
CUSMA
étant
when you hear
oui,
U.S.
oui.
officials reflecting
Alors,
again on Canada as the
Dans un sens,
51st
c'est
state.
Dans un autre monde,
Well,
c'est un
in
peu
a
bizarre.
sense,
Mais nous
in
vivons,
another world,
dans
it would
le
be
monde
strange.
actuel.
But in the
Et
current
c'est une
world,
manière c'est
well,
un aspect de la négociation américaine.
you know, this is really
dire
one
comme
aspect
cela.
of negotiating
Alors,
with the
c'est un aspect.
Americans. It's one
Il faut
aspect.
être, il faut être calme. Il faut avoir
We
un
have to be
plan.
calm, we have to have a
Il faut avoir
plan,
des options.
we have
Et
to have
surtout,
options,
il
and
faut concentrer
we especially
sur
have
ce
to
que
focus
nous pouvons contrôler.
on what we can control,
On peut contrôler comment nous
and we
bâtissons
can control how we
le
build
Québec,
Quebec,
Longueuil, le Québec et le
Longueuil, and Canada.
C'est pas dans un aspect c'est complexe, mais c'est pas
It's
plus
complex in
compliqué
one
que ça.
way, but it's really not more complicated than
Next
that.
question.
Hi, my question's for Mr. Carney. Gabriel Gindi, CBC News. U.S. President Donald Trump has tweaked several 232 tariffs on aluminum, steel, and copper imports, in some cases lowering them. So what should Canadians take away from this, and does this make you hopeful that the U.S. will backtrack further on tariffs in time?
I think there's a couple of things I would take from it. First is that the principal motivations relate to the impact of these tariffs on the United States economy, United States consumers, United States businesses. So there's adjustments because it's hurting the economy, those businesses, those consumers. So they make those adjustments. It does show, as have other changes in the past, show some flexibility. But of course, in these cases, they're 232s, as you know from your question, so they apply to all. And where our discussions, amongst other things, where our discussions with the Americans and the Mexicans are focused on is where are those biggest opportunities for win-win that's better for U.S. businesses, Canadian consumers, U.S. consumers. And that's where the focus is. So it tells us something, but it doesn't tell us everything, if I could put it that way. Yeah.
Dernière question. Last question.
Hi, Matt Grillo with CTV News. Just a question for the Premier. We know the Blue Line extension has been mentioned today. We know the budget for it has increased over the years. Is more money needed for the Blue Line to sort of finish it and get it through the finish line?
Well, with the announcement we're making today, we will have enough money to finance the rest of the project. So it is an important project. We have prioritized it. And I'm glad that with the announcement we are making today, it will be possible to have the complete budget to finance the extension of the Blue Line.
Okay, thank you. Merci.
And we were listening to the Prime Minister and the Premier of Quebec talking about a $10 billion funding over a 10-year period. The Prime Minister describing it as one of the most significant investments in the history of Quebec. And we heard the Quebec Premier saying Quebec is getting more than its fair share. The Prime Minister was asked if this is about undermining the separatist movement in Quebec. There's a Quebec election in the fall, and the Parti Québécois, which is a separatist party and has pledged to have another referendum on Quebec sovereignty, is doing fairly well in the polls. And the Prime Minister said this is about policy, not politics. And the Premier saying that she went to Ottawa and she wanted to kind of go a bit faster, get some action on this plan, so they moved up the pace. And then we heard the question about the 51st state and whether or not the U.S. ambassador to Canada, who reposted Donald Trump's 51st state jab, if you will, at Canada, or suggestion, whether he should be expelled from the country. The Prime Minister said no. This is an administration that we have to work with. We take the administration as it is. And on the 51st state, the Prime Minister just said that the President is exceptionally active and becoming even more so on social media, so they're not going to respond to everything that he posts. The CBC's Karina Roman joins me now from Ottawa. So Karina, do you want to maybe get into what we heard there in terms of the announcement, and then we can talk trade and 51st state and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, the one thing that stood out to me from the announcement, if you just sort of put to the side the numbers and the details, was that question from Paul Wells about, you said it was blocked for a long time. What unblocked it? How do you unblock it? What do you mean by blockage? And I just thought that was interesting because what it came down to, or what it seemed to come down to, is alignment. And that right now, because of everything that's facing the province of Quebec, all provinces really, and the country, because of the trade war and the tariffs and the weak economy, that now's not the time to, I guess, finagle over too many details or things that could hold it up, and figure a way to move forward with it. So that was interesting to me, although that did lead to the question eventually about, is this actually about politics, which he said no. Although I do think that Madame Fréchette was a little bit more open when she said that they wanted to demonstrate, at least from her perspective, that they can govern. So that's what I took away from the announcement in terms of the politics of it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I don't think that the Prime Minister is going to weigh in on who he wants to win the next provincial election. But let's talk about trade, because that has been the big story of the day. Dominic LeBlanc is in Washington. We've had this post from the U.S. President, and then the ambassador reposted it today, and so that's all become a bit of a story.
Yes, I did like how, as you said, it was interesting hearing the Prime Minister dance around that, but also in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way, that the President is known to be and has become even more so exceptionally active user of social media. And so if they weren't going to react before to every posting, they're certainly not going to react now. But he said no indication that they want to expel the ambassador. The way he said, because he was asked, how do you work with an administration that does this? And twofold, he said, first of all, it's an administration we have to work with. Didn't sound like a resounding endorsement of one that he enjoys it, but also talking about how in this negotiations, what do you do when, like, every time this seems to happen, it throws a spanner in the works? And he said, in another world, it would be strange that you would sit down across the table from people whose leader continues to talk about and try to undermine the sovereignty of your very own country, but that they have to focus, and it's really about focusing on what's important and not let that be a distraction. And that's been what they've said from the beginning, but I just thought it was interesting that he said in another world, normally, a normal world, this would not be something you would sit across the table from when someone's questioning your sovereignty. But in this world, in Donald Trump's world, you don't really have a choice. And so it is, as he said, an aspect of the negotiations.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's kind of a theme, the same theme. We take the world as it is, not necessarily as we want it to be. It's sort of in that theme, but I don't know if that's a jab at the U.S. administration or not, or some kind of, it is kind of strange. Did you want to...
He probably thinks he's just describing it as it is, right?
Describing it as it is. Did you want to talk a little bit about where we are, what we know about Dominic LeBlanc's meeting with the U.S. Trade Representative?
We did hear from Dominic LeBlanc on his way into meeting with USTR Jamieson Greer. I think we have a little bit of tape of that. It's not very long. Maybe we could play that for our audience.
The goals of this meeting is to be able to tell you how well it's gone when we finish at 5 o'clock this afternoon.
So there's confirmation. We will hear more about how it's gone at 5 o'clock when he comes out of the meeting, unless, of course, there's any kind of delay. And you and I will not be on the air anymore, but we will, as a network, obviously cover that very likely on Power and Politics. So not giving a lot away about what he's hoping from, and not wanting to set any kind of expectations, but willing to tell us how it goes. And I suppose that he'll be facing questions, of course, about whether there's any kind of schedule now going forward for talks like the Mexicans have with the U.S., or whether there's a hope that there can be a meeting of minds on the sectoral tariffs, and then finally what the reaction was from the USTR on Canada and now Mexico also, both saying publicly in letters that they want to have CUSMA renewed for the next 16 years as opposed to a yearly review, which is possibly where we're actually headed, but they've certainly made where they stand quite clear in these letters.
Karina, thank you. CBC's Karina Roman live in Ottawa. And we have lots more coverage on the future of CUSMA coming up. I'll be joined by a couple of trade specialists. Sergio Marchi and Stephen Vaughn will be here for a deeper dive, a Canadian and an American. That conversation is in less than 30 minutes away. More now on another of our stories that we're covering today. From Quebec, a toddler has died after being blown away in a bouncy castle over the weekend. Strong winds picked up and tossed the inflatable, causing injuries to the 3-year-old. And the CBC's Hilary Johnstone is following this story. And Hilary, we have a new development. Tell us about it.